Welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to be creating a tic-tac-toe game using JavaScript. Let's first take a look at the HTML and CSS for our game.
They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that could make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I got all this potential that's deep inside of me, but they hate when you're successful cause they try to be. They sit there being judgmental because you're trying things, and they just want you to settle and do the right thing. So get a good job, don't slack off. Wake up every morning, make a good impression on your boss. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do, and when you're making money, make sure you don't spend it too soon. Fuck that, I'll do what I wanna do. I got a different path from everyone, and that includes you. Who are you to tell me how to live life? In these times it feels like nobody's right, yeah. So I'ma figure out what else we succeed, and then
Now, let's write our JavaScript. Before we dive into the code, let's quickly go over the game rules. Tic-Tac-Toe is a game played on a 3x3 grid, where two players take turns marking a square with their X or O. The player who succeeds in placing 3 of their marks in a horizontal, vertical, or diagonal row wins the game. First, we start by selecting all the cells of the tic-tac-toe grid using const cells equals document.querySelectorAll.cell. This allows us to add event listeners to each cell so that the player can make a move. Next, we initialize some variables that we'll be using throughout the game. Let player turn equals true is used to keep track of whose turn it is, the player or the computer. Let player score equals 0 and let computer score equals 0 are used to keep track of the score of each player. We also select some elements from the HTML that we'll be using to display the scores and the results of the game. Const player score span equals document.querySelector #player score selects an element with the ID player score and assigns it to the variable player score span. This will be used to update the player's score in the HTML. We do the same for the computer's score with const computer score span equals document.querySelector #computer score. Const result equals document.querySelector.results selects an element with the class results and assigns it to the variable result. This will be used to display the result of the game. We then use a for loop to add an event listener to each cell. When the player clicks on a cell, the event listener is triggered and the code inside the function runs. The code checks if the cell has already been clicked by checking if the inner HTML is an empty string. If it's not empty, the function returns and the player can't make a move on that cell. If the cell is empty, the code checks if it's the player's turn. If it is, the player's move is made by setting the inner HTML of the cell to X. Then, we'll call the function check4winner to check if the player has won. After that, we'll set player turn to false and call the computer turn function after a delay of 500 milliseconds. The check4winner function will check for all of the winning combinations for tic-tac-toe. It will do this by looping through an array of winning combinations, and for each combination, it will check if the cells at the indexes specified in the combination have the same inner HTML, and if so, it will declare the winner by setting the inner HTML of the result variable to the winner's symbol. It will also increment the respective player's score. If there are no empty cells left and no winner, the function will declare a tie. The computer turn function will first create an array called empty cells which will hold all of the indexes of the empty cells. It will loop through all of the cells, and if the inner HTML of a cell is empty, it will push the index of that cell into the empty cells array. After that, it will generate a random number between 0 and the length of the empty cells array, and use that number as an index to place the computer's piece on the board. And it will call the check4winner function again to check if the computer has won. Finally, we'll have a reset function which will be called when the game is over. This function will loop through all of the cells, set their inner HTML to an empty string, and remove the fade-in class from them. It will also set the inner HTML of the result variable to an empty string. And lastly, we'll have a button on the page with the event listener that will call the reset function when clicked. We've used JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, create event listeners, and implement game logic. This can be a great starting point for anyone looking to create a similar game and one step closer to become a web developer. But remember, this is just a basic implementation. You can always add more features such as difficulty level, animation, and sound effects to make it more interactive and interesting. You can also refactor the code to make it more efficient and easier to maintain. And also you can add more game modes like multiplayer and online. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on new videos. Thanks for watching.